Hi, in this video I'd like to introduce you to the King and Queen of Rincon. These are two geoglyphs in the hills just north of Rincon, New Mexico. These hills are part of a larger set of hills that are part of the Rincon mining district. As a prospector, I marked a whole bunch of features out here. There's scrapes, pits, shafts, tunnels with stopes. It's all visible on Google Earth. But I now realize that none of this matters or means anything because all this disturbance out here is prehistoric. And in this video, I'm going to show you the evidence to back that up. I'm going to concentrate on the east edge of the Rincon Hills. This is an area that I've been out prospecting in before. And just in this small area, there's so much to show you. So here's the Rincon Quarry. I've collected here many times. Everybody knows about this place to collect barite. The specimens aren't great there, so people don't go there very often. It's got high walls of rock. The barite is in the real thin seams inside those big rocks. And it all kind of looks old. So as we look from above, you can see it's not very regular, kind of strangely shaped. Has different levels and slopes. And when you orient the screen with the east at the top, you can begin to see that this quarry actually forms a pattern. And it's a picture of a bird. It's a geoglyph. The wings are, one wing is outlined in a road. The eye is a big pile of boulders, which I think may represent the location of a tomb, believe it or not. So there's what I see here, and it's pretty clear, and I'm going to show you many more of these. When you look east from this quarry, there's two small hills. This is the southernmost of those. You can see that on the slope it looks to be striated, like it's contoured. There's all this red dirt in the middle, and then you can see a cut up near the top. So as we reorient this from above, you can see it forms this figure of a woman. And you can see what those features are. That cut outlines her arm and is red, and the red coming down off the slope is her sash. And part of the robe is that striated or contoured area that's covered in grass. Just the colors, it pops out a lot more. And if you zoom in on the head, you can see where the ear is. There's this feature that's a big mound of dirt in the shape of a pyramid or cone shape, which I believe is probably this person's tomb. I'm calling her the Queen of Rincon. If you zoom out, you find out that this drawing of a woman is part of a larger string of glyphs, which includes what appears to be a kind of a porcupine guy coming up behind the woman, and on the right, someone who looks European, has long curly black hair and a pointy nose. All this is subtly done with different colored soils, rocks, vegetation, etc. And if you zoom out even farther, you can see that there are even more parts to this landscape painting. You look at it all different scales. There's a huge face in the lower right corner looking up. There's just so many ways to look at this, you wouldn't believe how complex it is. And it's all done on a 3D surface, which is amazing. Now I'm going to zoom out even more, and you can see all this red material in the middle of this shot and towards the freeway. It's all red rock from this area. I was just going to show that if you change to a satellite photo with oblique lighting, how it almost all disappears. But if you look at the ridges and the contours, you can even see some of the shapes that maybe they used to make faces. So it can clue you into what kind of figures to look for when you see a more 2D perspective with direct lighting above. I wanted to point out that as I adjust these screenshots, I'm using paint.net, and the only thing I'm doing is adjusting the color levels and contrast and brightness. So it's just bringing out the colors, intensifying the colors that are actually there. I'm not drawing on these or making these pictures up. All I'm doing is adjusting what's there. I don't know if I need to describe these. They're pretty distinct and obvious, but I see a character on the right, facing to the right, that looks very Southeast Asian in style and design. I actually have had a Thai embroidery that had a figure that looked almost exactly like that. There's a sort of a lion head figure facing to the left, and if you just look at it for a while, you'll see all kinds of different faces at different scales, because they scale up and they scale down. This entire area was gridded off prehistorically, and you can see the different cuts and marks across these hills. This isn't ranching, this is part of the prehistoric activity here. They've disturbed every bit of the surface. And not only that, but they applied some sort of small-scale grid over the whole area, so that it makes it look like a tapestry or a weaving. You can use the paint.net photo adjustment, ink sketch adjustment, and it'll brings out the grid pattern. So now I'm going to zoom back out and swing it around so that north's at the top of the screen. You can see the I-25 at the bottom. You can see the two isolated hills in the quarry near the top. And if you zoom in, you can see that the quarry now seems to form a face. The Queen's glyph also appears to form a face of a red-headed guy with a red beard, kind of a round head guy. Who has a dog or an animal with him, and then above him is this face of a man who looks Asian. As you look at all these pictures, look at all the scrape marks, you'll see everything is disturbed, and when you get in close, you'll see that it's all gridded off again to make it look like a tapestry. As you zoom in, you can see the light scraped areas forming the highlights on the side of this man's face. And then you can see that the mouth is formed by these red rocks. It's all real subtle. You can see all the little grids too, if you look closely. And I believe that these disturbances around the base of the hill are probably tombs, and that this guy might be buried in a tomb right on top of this hill somewhere. And one last time, I'm gonna take this south hill and orient it a different direction, and it looks like it could be a figure of a man coming up and kissing the queen on the back of the ear. Or he could have this sort of breathing device in his mouth. And if you think that's strange, I've actually seen scenes of diving and underwater breathing devices and glyphs in southern New Mexico. Also, the Assyrians had carvings showing people using underwater bladder breathing devices, so it wasn't unknown to people of the past. And from this angle, it appears that the queen might be showing a little bit of bosom. Now I'm going to flip this around again and start heading up this road to the top of the hills. You'll notice here at the bottom of the road there's these different colors: red, blue, yellow, white. I estimate these glyphs are probably about 600 to 1200 years old. So I believe that these colors were more vibrant then. They've been fading and oxidizing for that long. If you intensify the colors, you can see there's some sort of faintly painted figures on the landscape at the bottom of the hill here. As you zoom in, you can see that this one disturbance looks to be a bird's head, like a pelican, and again, a couple of lightly painted figures there. And again, I believe there's probably burials in this feature that forms the head of the bird. As you move up the road, you see this long blue ridge. You can see some cleared areas. That's not ranching, that's raking. All this area is disturbed. I believe some of these colored soils and rock may have been brought up from the shafts they were digging to make tombs. And you see the quarry now looks like a rabbit-eared guy. See this other face. Again, it's like this painting on the landscape. At the right end of that blue ridge, there's this disturbance that I believe represents a man with a headlamp shining a light. If you think that's strange, well, ancient Sumerians had invented batteries, and I'm thinking that these prehistoric peoples all over the world had these technologies, and that it's actually us that have lost the knowledge that they had these technologies because Western culture wiped them all out. Moving farther up the road to near the top of the mountain, again, there's lots of disturbances and areas that I believe are tombs. This disturbance appears to be kind of a pointy-headed man. There's a shaft right up by his head that's still open. Down at the bottom, there's a pretty large dump. I believe there must have been another shaft somewhere in that disturbance, and there may have been actually several other tombs within this disturbance. And you can see that the face is all made of these features that are man-made, little berms and places dug out, roads. And again, near the top of the mountain, all this area I have labeled as tombs. And if you look off to the right, there's a thing that says face, and that's another geoglyph I'm going to show you that appears to have a tomb. It's another cone-shaped mound of dirt, and coincidentally, it's kind of in the same location of what might be where an ear or earring would be. Next to that glyph, there's these hills with all these disturbances everywhere, just bunches of them. And they're not open holes, they look to be filled in holes. Occasionally there's an open shaft or a trench like in this picture, but then you'll see ones right next to it that appear to have dirt mounded up on top of where a pit would have been. So I don't know who would have gone out here and prospected all over these hills and then filled them back in. And finally, I want to return back to the southeast edge of the mountains by the large quarry, show you this ridge line right above and to the west of the quarry, and what's up there. It's a number of prospects, what we would normally call prospects. But if you go down the edge of the ridge, you see again, there's all these disturbances, pockmarking the whole surface. Again, I don't think this is some sort of prospecting method. I believe these to be tombs. Here's a couple pictures of some of these features. You can note in this one, there's a pile of rocks that looks to be sorted into similar sizes. And if you go to this next prospect, it's fairly regular, and there's this intrusion going down through it. And I believe this could be a previous burial shaft that this second feature ran into. Now this little prospect or area here is pretty squared, and this might actually was going to be a room for a burial, this little chamber right here, but maybe it collapsed, the roof collapsed before they could finish this one off, or because they ran into the shaft of the other tomb, they abandoned this one. This intrusion appears to be rock lined, and it's full of, again, cobbles that were of the kind of shape and size of those sorted rocks next to those other holes. It's also mixed with all this reddish mud that's very hard. This is almost like concrete trying to break one of those pieces out of there. On top of this ridge, there's a number of rock structures, round rings of rock. Believe it or not, I believe this was the habitations of the elite, the nobles. All around the world, nomadic farmers, pastoralists, the elite lived in tents. And so I believe the pit house sites and pueblos that archaeologists dig out here are actually the habitations of the slaves that were building all these huge features out here in these hills. There are a number of little rock art panels on top of the ridge. After looking at these glyphs, I started to look at these petroglyphs in different ways, and instead of just looking at the lines, I started looking at all the different patterns and colors and realizing that these look just like those landscape glyphs if you intensify the colors and see the reds and the blacks and the different faces and figures that they make. This one appears to be a bull of all things, running to the right. Maybe those squiggly lines is someone riding. If you turn it over, it actually looks kind of like a insect guy with a head to the left and legs, those squiggly lines underneath. Again, these panels have different colors. They've been picked out. There's red on them. I think they're more elaborate kind of glyphs than we think when we just call these things petroglyphs. You used to look at something like this, it's just a bunch of squiggly lines, but it appears to be faces inside of faces. Again, just like these, what I would consider Mesoamerican style glyphs on the landscape. This one looks like a stick figure of a guy holding a fish. But if you look at the whole thing, the dark and the light, it could be the face of a man with a hat and putting something in his mouth. And this figure, I think, might be an example of how you make a wheel. You have a square of wood, you have crosses going across that, you put wood at 45-degree angle to the square, and you've got basics of a wheel. If you made it this long, I'm going to show you a few specimens of barite from this quarry. And then one piece of salamalane out of this mine at the end of the ridge that also looks to be stylized to look like a pair of eyes. Zooming out even farther, the Rincon Mountains, the reddish area there at the lower center part, appear to be part of an even larger landscape glyph with this sort of square-looking head up to the north. And that area is about 2.3 miles across. It's all scraped and raked. It's not ranching. There's no fence lines there. And then down in the sort of lower corner of this head figure, there's a glyph of an armadillo. It's the head is formed by a little reservoir there, and inside the eye there's actually something we would normally call a cattle tank. And then I think all these dark spots along there, or the light spots, are again tombs, burials. So as we look at these glyphs of the king and queen of Rincon again, you might be confused. You might see this and say, yeah, that looks real, but you might wonder, well, why is this here? You know, who made this? This isn't supposed to be here. Why are there people that look like they're from Europe and Asia? Well, my theory is that these are the 7 tribes of the Aztec. And if you read Aztec history, there's the Aztecs were the 7th of 7 tribes to enter the Valley of Mexico. There's also legends about Quetzalcoatl crashing into a pit of bones and creating all the different peoples of the world. So right there's evidence that the Aztecs knew about at least the different peoples of the world. And I think that they were the different peoples of the world. I believe the other tribes of the Aztec came to North America between 2 and 700 AD, when we start to get ceramic vessels. Around 600 to 700 AD, we start to see painted ceramics, and I believe that's when more of the elite from these tribes started to settle in this area. From 1125 to 1325, the Aztecs were fighting their way south to the Valley of Mexico, which was their ultimate goal all along, and was the whole reason they had started this kingdom in North America, was to get the produce, the people, the power, the wealth, everything you need to attack such a fortified and sophisticated culture in the Valley of Mexico.